Hi, and welcome to Tea Tuesday. I like to thank Life with Patty and Kathy's Favorite Things for hosting this open collab. You can have hot tea, cold tea, formal tea, or informal tea, or a beverage of your choice. I hope everybody had a nice 4th of July, whether you stayed home and it was quiet, or if you whooped it up. It was very quiet for us. Well, today my choice is sweet tea. That's right, sweet tea. And I love me some sweet tea. Oh, yes, I do. And guess what we got today? We got Mr. Twiddle. Oh, yes, we do. So let's get on with this. It's Mr. Twiddle Gets a Shock. Chapter 2. Mr. Twiddle was always doing something silly. Well, did you ever hear the tale of what happened when he threw his handkerchief into the fire by mistake? I'll tell you. It happened one morning when Mr. Twiddle was opening his letters by the kitchen fire. "You can throw the envelopes into the fire," said Mrs. Twiddle. "It will save me fetching the waste paper basket." Well, Mr. Twiddle at the moment felt he was going to sneeze. So with an envelope in one hand and the best white silk handkerchief in the other, he sat in his chair waiting for a sneeze to come. And when it did come, shoo! Mr. Twiddle caught the sneeze in the envelope and threw his handkerchief quite by mistake into the fire. Well, of course, he was terribly upset as soon as he had done this and tried to rake his handkerchief out of the fire. A bit of burning coal fell onto the rug and scorched a hole at once. Mrs. Twiddle came running in when she smelled the burning, and how she scolded Mr. Twiddle. "Catching a sneeze in an envelope and throwing your best handkerchief on the fire," she snorted, pouring water on the burning rug. "Whatever will you do next, Twiddle? Don't you know the difference between a handkerchief and an envelope? You'll be poking that fire with your pencil and trying to write with a poker next. You might have had the whole house on fire. Go out for a walk. Do and don't come in till dinner time." Poor Mr. Twiddle. He was really very unhappy about the best handkerchief. He got up, found his hat, put it on, back to front, and went into the village. And very soon he met old Mrs. Gable, who always loved a chat. When she saw Mr. Twiddle looking so upset, she stopped. "What's the matter?" she said. "Oh," said Mr. Twiddle, "a dreadful thing happened this morning. I threw my handkerchief on the fire by mistake, and it got burnt. And when I tried to get it out of the flames, some burning coal fell on the carpet. And, good gracious me," said Mrs. Gable, "no wonder you felt upset." Then she caught sight of Sally Simple and hurried over to tell her the news. Of course, she added a bit to it to make it even more exciting. "Oh, Sally Simple," she cried, "have you heard what happened at the Twiddle's house this morning? Why, poor old Twiddle threw his handkerchief on the fire by mistake, and in getting it out the fire, he got fire on the rug, and it set all ablaze." "Goodness me," said Sally, quite frightened. "And did the kitchen catch alight?" "I expect so," said Mrs. Gable happily. "Oh, yes, I'm sure it blazed up to the ceiling." Sally Simple was thrilled. She longed to tell someone about the fire at the Twiddles. She saw Dame Shoo on the way and rushed to tell her. "Oh, Dame Shoo," she cried, "have you heard of the terrible fire at poor Mrs. Twiddle's this morning?" "No," said Damshoe. "What about it?" "Oh, Damshoe," she cried, "have you heard?" "What about?" "Oh, Mr. Twiddle dropped his handkerchief in the fire that started a dreadful burning," said Sally Simple. "Yes, the rug caught fire and the flames shot up to the ceiling. The whole kitchen was on fire." "But how dreadful," said Dame Shoe. "I suppose the house will burnt down." "Yes, sure to be," said Sally Simple. "I do wonder if the fire engines had gone to see it." "And don't you think we ought to offer to give the Twiddles a bed for tonight because their house burnt down? They'll have nowhere to sleep." Yes, said Dame Shoe. "I'll go and tell everyone else, Sally, and we'll see what we can do." She hurried off, longing to tell someone the news. On the way, she passed the fire station. She peeped inside, and to her very great surprise, she saw the big fire engine still there. It hadn't gone to the Twiddles. I say," cried Damshoe, rushing into the fire station in a great hurry. "Haven't you heard of the dreadful fire at the Twiddles' house? It will be burnt to nothing if you don't hurry at once." "First we heard of it," cried the captain of the fire brigade, and he sounded the big fire bell at once. In 3 minutes, every fireman was in his place, complete with helmets, with a loud clanging of bells, and the great red fire engine, oh my goodness, what next, roared out of the building. Clang, 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 it sped away to Mr. Twiddle's house. Everyone ran after it to see where it was going. It stopped outside Mr. Twiddle's house. The firemen undid the long hose and looked for the fire. Mrs. Twiddle looked out the window. She saw the fire engine. She saw the firemen unwinding the hose. She saw the crowds and crowds of people. Whatever had they all come for? She opened the door and looked. "Ah, Mrs. Twiddle, where's the fire?" shouted the men. "What fire?" asked Mrs. Twiddle in the greatest astonishment. "The fire we've come to put out," said the men. "Well, there's only one fire in the house, and that's in the kitchen grate," said Mrs. Twiddle, even more astonished. "And I'm sure I don't want that put out, thank you." At the moment, Mr. Twiddle walked up, looked as surprised as he could be. "Such a crowd around his house! You said there was a terrible fire in the house," cried Damshoe. "I didn't," said Mr. Twiddle indignantly. "You did," shouted everyone. "I only told Mrs. Gable I had burnt my handkerchief by mistake," shouted Mr. Twiddle, and then he went inside, banged the door. The fire engine turned around and drove off in disgust. Everyone went home. Mrs. Twiddle stared at Mr. Twiddle crossly. "Do you need to bring the fire engine here and half the town just because you happened to burn your handkerchief?" He said, "Really, Mr. Twiddle? Please don't do any more foolish things today." "Don't worry, I shan't," said Mr. Twiddle gloomily. And then he threw his hat into the wastepaper basket, hung up his newspaper on a peg. "Well, really, Mr. Twiddle?" And next week will be the 3rd chapter. I hope you're enjoying Mr. Twiddle. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow for Grammy's DT Meals and Snacks. Have a great day. Bye now.